Heyo, welcome back to the Undrafted and Unqualified Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm Anthony, here with Vinny once again. We say this all the time, but it should be a shorter episode today. We got some stacks to do. No news, we're not getting into anything. Personally, too, I've been way more invested in the NBA currently. It's going crazy
Mhm.
after, the Giannis trade. John Morant got traded now, and now LeBron's saying he's leaving the Lakers. So I haven't been
Yep.
invested as much with the minimal offseason news. So we're not going to get into any of that. I don't know if you got anything off the top of your head we could talk about, but for me, I'm not
No, the only thing is just like, I think we mentioned last episode is you're just starting to see more training camp noise. Like it's really it's stuff that's all could be smoke. Everyone looks good. It just happens every year, but every year we look back and like, oh, they did kind of mention that. And then so it's some of the stuff, but I really am not someone to get too into a report from a team talking about how they like their player. Of course they do. Why would they say they look bad?
Yeah. No, that's valid. I think, you know, that's one thing we'll get to later in the offseason, but don't overdo it with the hype. I think Ja'Cory Krosky Merritt was the prime example of that last offseason, right? And it's like he was flying up boards. Like I think I saw him go in the sixth in some drafts. It's like that's way too early. And then sure enough, he wasn't all that good, right? He wasn't worth that
Yep.
draft capital. So it's just one thing to note. Like be careful of all the noise. Sometimes you don't want to go too early. Don't read into it too much. But it's also important to take a look at and try to make it out enough to say like, okay, this guy we can bump up a little bit.
Yeah. The main thing is mostly injuries. I feel like that's where you could get a good read on stuff because teams will be fairly honest about that unless you're Christian McCaffrey and the day before week
Yeah,
one you're
yeah,
out for the year all of a sudden. But yeah.
yeah. Keep an eye on Kittle. We'll
Yeah.
see what's going on with Kittle. Can we trust
Yep.
Shanahan or can we trust the other reports? So
Yep.
we'll see there. Although rumors are he's saying himself he could be back week one. But anyways, keep an eye as news comes out. We'll touch upon stuff too throughout this off season. But we're gonna just get right into these stacks. So we each chose three of our favorite stacks this year. We look at last year; they weren't that good, honestly. So we're not gonna really touch upon them. Um, you know, I had a couple like true rushing QBs in Justin Fields and Kyler Murray. Um, Dak and CD was fine if CD didn't get hurt. You know, Goff and Amon Ra for Vinny. Jalen Hurts and AJ Brown if AJ Brown didn't have that whole issues going on, Herb and Lad McConkey. So they weren't terrible, but nothing was like, wow, that was a smash pick. So you'll see my strategy changed a little from like these true like mobile quarterbacks who aren't as good passers to, we took some guys who might have some value. I was focusing a little bit on value this year. Vinny, did you have any strategy in terms of what stacks you were picking?
I was also looking at value, but you'll see as we're making them that, it kind of the way I was looking at it with the stacks is some of these guys are going to be early round picks, and that's just the reality of it. Of course, it's like if you want multiple guys on your team, one of them is most likely going to be you're going to have to pay up the price for. But it kind of opened up of like if you go for that early guy, and then a lot of these stacks, the other end of it, which is usually the quarterback is where the value is. So it kind of like taught or showed me that if you draft this player, it kind of sets up your draft strategy where you can wait on quarterback, which I kind of liked that. Like you get that elite asset and then you can kind of fill out the rest of your team and get quarterback in a later round, which fills out the stack still.
For sure. Yeah, I think this year's interesting too. None of us did a tight end. So,
Yeah.
last year I did Kyler with McBride, which not bad. McBride was filthy.
McBride definitely hit.
Yeah, had Kyler been healthy, maybe he would have too. But
Yeah.
yeah, you'll see some of the value. We'll talk about it. So let's get into it. We each have three. Vinny, why don't you start us off with your first one here, and we'll just go back and forth. So you can start us off with the first stack that you brought up here.
Sure. So my first stack is I'll go with the one that I find the most value in across each position, and that's going to be Brock Purdy and Mike Evans. So I didn't calculate the exact pick, but currently Brock Purdy is going at an ADP of 96, and Mike Evans is an ADP of 54. So I
Like
think
the
for
ninth and fifth round. That's what
so
I.
yeah, so ninth and fifth round respectively. And I really like this one because I feel like it could have the most potential return if everything works out. And we saw that as you Ant went through last year's stacks, that's not the case most of the time. Because with a stack, you're not just relying on one player to kind of fulfill their end of the bargain of being a relevant fantasy player, but you're asking for two, and that's also asking two guys to stay healthy, which is a big ask. But in this case, I think the value comes into play. We talked a lot about you talked about Purdy as a QB value already. So I'm not going to dive too much into him, but the real value here to me is Mike Evans because the usual part of a stack that you need to pay up for the premium is the wide receiver position, and you could get Mike Evans in the fifth round. And I think a lot of that is due to how last year went for him. It was his first year ever not having 1,000 yards, and that
Mhm.
was majority due to injury. I think even before that there was up and down games, but that's always how he's been. He's been a little bit streaky and just kind of always fills out that stat line at the end of the year. And then also, age is still a factor for him and the injury history. So there's of course questions, but I think there's also a lot to like. The 49ers clearly believe in him as he still has a lot of gas left in the tank. They gave him a multi-year deal and paid him very nicely as well. So he's gotten paid to be their wide receiver one. Of course, Ayuk is out of the picture. There's no room for him to come back in.
Yeah.
And then Jawan Jennings left for the Vikings. So that still leaves Ricky Pearsall. Um, and then George Kittle, who we just mentioned, we don't even know what his timeline really is. So that means that there could really be Mike Evans is the clear number one option. And the track record for this guy is he's going to put up 1,000 yards and close to 10 TDs. And I very much believe in that if he stays healthy, that will be the case. So there's some risk with this stack, and of course we know what Purdy can do. You've explained that. You guys can go check out that value episode. But when Purdy's on the field, he's also very consistent and a very underrated fantasy piece, even though he doesn't have that rushing ability. So this to me feels like one of those true stacks where you're getting 12 or 10 points, for a touchdown across those players, or 10 or more points. And I think it could really fill up the stat sheet on a weekly basis if these guys remain on the field together. So with the current ADP for both of them, this feels like out of all the stacks we're going to talk about today, the best value and the most, I guess, realistic one where you can kind of play the board. There's not necessarily a point where you have to reach. I think you can kind of have a filled out team by the fourth round of like you have your positions of need. Maybe if I wouldn't go into a draft being like I want Mike Evans and Brock Purdy, but I feel like it's one of those situations where if you go two RBs and a wide receiver, then you get Mike Evans, then you can just go get Brock Purdy at the end, and yeah, I think you're going to love that team. So definitely some risk due to the restrictions Mike Evans might have with injury, but I don't think you can ever really not take advantage of the ADP and the value. It's not as much of a risk as some of these other guys were if they were to go down.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the risk. It's volatile. I think
Mm-hmm.
this is probably the biggest range of outcomes for all the
Oh,
stacks we had.
absolutely.
So, this injuries could hit, it could be a disaster. It's San Francisco, but at the same time, you're really not paying a premium. And if Purdy's slinging it like he did towards the end of the year and he's throwing mad touchdowns, well, a lot are going to go to Mike Evans.
Yep.
And personally, to me, this is really starting to feel like Devontae Adams going to the Rams last year, where I was out, the injury history, the age, going to a new team, what's it going to look like? And he could just eat. It could just be a lot of touchdowns for him, similar to Devontae. Like, he wasn't really this guy who was a target hog or anything. I mean, that was Puka. And truthfully, I think it's going to be Kittle and CMC in this offense. So I think Mike Evans might be like the second or third passing option behind these other two guys. But like you said, I think the touchdowns could be there, and there is a lot of upside with these picks as well. Like Mike
Mm-hmm.
Evans, middle of the fifth, it's not bad at all. So I
No.
like this one.
Yep.
My first one, probably very biased, but also my favorite, Drake
Uh,
May and AJ Brown. And Drake May's going at the 608. AJ Brown's going at the 208. Look, I mean, I'll start off with Drake May. He's my QB2 overall. You're getting him in the sixth round. Usually, guys with like this elite rushing upside is going to be third, fourth round. You're getting a discount on this guy behind Lamar, behind Jaden Daniels. If I'm to pull it up, the QB's ADP real quick. He's going behind Jaden Daniels, Joe Burrow, and two of those guys we just talked about why in our bust episode of why we're not as big on those two. So to be able to get this guy after all of them and with like they're all kind of in the same round but over a round in difference between Lamar and Drake May, I just really like this. I think a lot of times we see these QBs going a lot earlier too than the six, so really the six isn't bad for any of these guys, but the fact that Drake's going even later, I just really like this spot for him. This is the best supporting cast of his career, and he already showed elite efficiency last year. He was the runner up for MVP, and now you add AJ Brown, you add Romeo Dobbs. Like I think this is just a great situation for Drake May to improve even more, which is almost crazy to say with how efficient he was. And people are going to say, "Oh, the schedule, the schedule." Well, if anything, they might throw even more if they're down
Yeah.
in games. So, um, he has a lot of upside there. Love this for Drake May. AJ Brown to me also has wide receiver one overall upside. This is easily the best QB of his career. He's got a great deep ball, fits his game, fits AJ Brown's game. So I really like this a lot. I think he's going to just get peppered with targets. This is an offense that's a top 10 offense. There's going to be red zone opportunities. AJ Brown's elite in the red zone. You know, you're telling me like you can get this guy in the middle of the second. He's going after Drake London, Justin Jefferson. I think this is a great spot where if you go running back early, well, great. Now you have an elite running back and an elite wide receiver. If you go wide receiver early, you have the best wide receiver duo in your league because then it's going to be something like Puka at the 104 and you get this guy at the 208. I mean, that's ridiculous. So I don't think you're actually spending too much draft capital for the upside you're getting with these two. I mean, both to me could be in the conversation, be like a first and third rounder next year. You know, so I think it's almost a discount. I think they're pretty fairly priced. Like you're not overpaying, and you're certainly not getting crazy value on them. But at the same time, like these guys' upsides are through the roof. I love this fit for each other, and I think the Patriots are going to have another good offense. So
Yeah, no, I said with Purdy and Evans, I don't recommend going into a draft thinking about the stack. But in this case, this is one that I'm thinking about and that I'm planning for, that I want both those guys because I like everything you said. I don't think it's biased because I think it's just the reality.
yeah,
I think all around football, this just feels like the direct comparison to when Josh Allen was like, getting into his prime, his like main MVP years, and he goes and gets Stephon Diggs. This just
yeah,
feels like, maybe a little earlier on in Drake May's career, but he's still at that point where like he's going to start pushing. He was runner up in MVP last year, runner up in the Super Bowl. He's starting to push for those, that point of his career, that prime. And you get a guy like AJ Brown, it just feels like it's destined to boom and be a bunch of fantasy points. And those guys do feel like values right now. So I even still like there are guys that I would reach on in a lot of ways. That's why I think like going in with a plan that okay, maybe if someone reaches on Drake maybe for you, you still have AJ Brown that I would love to have on my fantasy team.
yeah.
So this is a stack that I'd honestly like want to go out and get and pursue as a draft plan.
Yeah, if you're drafting and you see AJ Brown there in the second round and you get him, I would start to look to like target
Yeah,
Drake May. You
yeah.
know, obviously play the board however it falls for those first two rounds, but if AJ Brown lands for you, like target Drake May later because I think it'll be unreal for the two of them.
Yeah.
Why don't you hit us with your second stack?
Sure, yeah. So this next one, I had a lot of fun doing some research on this one and pulling up some stats because I don't even think it's an overreaction to say that this has been the most productive and consistent stack in fantasy football over the past 4 seasons. I mean that it sounds crazy, but that is Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jared Goff. So to throw some stats really quick,
And real quick,
yeah,
you brought them in last year too.
yeah,
And
yeah,
it was a hit. And like bringing them back again, I think people are gonna write it off. But I'm with you. So let's hear about those
Well, yeah, and,
stats.
and I'll mention their ADP just to begin with because I think the fact that like, it's maybe not the most this isn't like, a hot take. This is clearly everyone knows this is a pretty fairly good stack, but it
Mhm.
doesn't reflect on the ADP of Jared Goff. I mean, of course, we're not basing ADP off of stacks and ability to draft stacks, but of course, you're gonna have a premium for Mon Ra in the end of the first, middle of the first, maybe start of the second. I don't think he should fall that far, but wherever it is, it's most likely a premium pick. And then you have Jared Goff, who's around the eighth or the ninth or 10th round.
Yeah.
So there's a
Yeah, I put
big
that
dip.
in for you. He's early 10th, first pick in
Yeah,
the 10th
early
right now.
10th. So I'll put out some stats. So let's see. Amon Ra, where? Oh, okay. So I'll start with Jared Goff. Four straight QB 10 or better finishes. And mind you, he's up to QB 16 right now after four straight QB 10 finishes or better. So he has a couple of QB 5 finishes in there, QB 6. So that was shocked me to begin with. And also to go along with those, part of the reason he was in those top 10 every year is three straight 4,500 passing yard seasons with 30 plus touchdowns in each of those three past seasons. So of course, the main beneficiary of that is Amon-Ra St. Brown, who has, what is that, three straight wide receiver three finishes. Probably one of the more underrated stats that this is just Mr. Consistent.
Hmm.
And four straight seasons in the top 10 with Goff at the helm. So these guys have a track record of just putting up numbers, and all those numbers, all those stats contribute to fantasy points. And if you have both those guys in a lineup on a given week where they're putting up these monster numbers, you're basically guaranteed at least 40 points per game from those, or points per week from those two players. So that right there is a great reason to draft both of them because of the fact that it's just consistent. You know what you're getting week in and week out when those people are when Amon-Ra and Jared Goff are on the field. Now, there is the premium of Amon-Ra, like I mentioned. So with this stack in mind, I think it would really depend on, of course, getting Amon-Ra. And I think that, like I said, similar to uh, the past two stacks we've talked about, I don't think this is one that you like go out and say like I'm going to get this one because the variability of Jared Goff being available in the 10th round, it's hard to plan your draft round a pick in the 10th round. But if you get Amon Ra, in my opinion, I would make it a priority to go get Jared Goff. I would reach on him around ahead just because of the guarantee. You know exactly what you're getting. You don't have to mess around with that position all year. You don't have to mess around with the waiver wire. It's just going to be an elite offense, another productive year for Amon Ra. And then Jared Goff, which I didn't even realize before researching into it, has been so consistent over
Yep.
these past 4 years with the Lions, and nothing's changed. I mean, of course, Ben Johnson's not there, but he wasn't there last year, and they did it all again, the both of them. So this is by far my favorite stack in the NFL. I think it's my favorite one in fantasy too. And it really is one that if I end up in the back end of the first, I think Amon Ra is a value there to begin with, but then it just creates a necessity in my mind to go get Jared Goff because I wouldn't mess around at any other. I would create the rest of my team and just lock in that I can, maybe even reach at get Goff in the ninth round if I have to.
Yeah. I mean, you're right. Like, it's just QB so deep this year. So that's
Mhm.
why Goff to me is like at QB 15 or whatever. But I'm with you. I think this is an elite stack. If you have Amon Ra, get Goff. And you can double up at QB too.
Mhm.
You could get him plus Kyler, maybe. I mean, that's sick. Like, what
Yeah.
if Kyler ends up hitting with the rushing upside? So I think that's how I'd try and go about it. Get like a more of a mobile QB along with
Mhm.
Goff, and you're feeling good. And I don't know what you do at tight end. Depends if you go early or late. But yeah, I like this a lot. I think it's so consistent. And yeah, Amon
Yeah,
Ra,
I mean, and even
wide
if you,
receiver three, he goes after it every year.
yeah, no, I know, and like so, of course, if you're that consistent at wide receiver three, there's obvious upside to be wide receiver one overall every year because you're just right there every year. All it takes is just one more really good week better than the rest. So, yeah, no, this is a ridiculous stack that, like, in Goff's case, has just somehow become underappreciated, undervalued.
Yep. Yeah, I'm close to even wanting to put Amon Ra above JSN. Like, that's
Yeah.
how I feel about Amon Ra,
Hmm.
just because of the consistency. But
Yeah.
then
Yep.
again, there's a very fair argument for JSN, Puka, and
Oh
Jamar
yeah.
Chase to be above them. So I
Yep.
get it. But yeah, great stack. My second stack, Patrick Mahomes and Rashi Rice. Patrick Mahomes going in the middle of the eighth round, and Rashi Rice going in the early third at the 304. Listen, I wrote off Mahomes last year. He fell off after his electric start to the year. I get it. He was like the QB 11. He's coming back from injury. I get it. But this is the lowest you'll ever be able to draft Mahomes. Like it's the middle of the eighth round. And I may be a bit down again on him coming back from injury, but middle of the eighth round, I feel like you could easily just pair up with another guy. Like maybe you get Mahomes and Goff and do the Goff Amon Ross stack and have Mahomes too. Like, you know what I mean? There's so many options here when you can take Mahomes that late. And I know Rice has had all the off the field issues. He's coming back from injury too, but he's got like top six upside and he's going in the third round. And I think it's a discount at this point. Like that means he's going to be probably a wide receiver two for your team, and he'll be a nasty one at that. So it just feels like there's value based on injury, the off the field issues, things like that. But they got Bieniemy back at offensive coordinator, which I think is great for them. I get it. Injuries are tanking the guy's ADP, but I think their upside's elite. Like, I mean, Mahomes has top one overall QB potential. We know this. So if they're throwing the ball, that is absolutely the case. Rashi Rice, I mean, top three if we really want to put like as high as it could go. I don't think that hits, especially now that they got Ken Walker. They're gonna have a run game. They probably don't need to throw as much, but it just feels like there's so much value that I have to bring up this stack. I mean, it's Patrick Mahomes over anything. And you could even make the argument, well, Rice isn't that good when there's a run game, and then you don't want to go Rice and all the off the field issues. I get that. Then maybe do a Mahomes Kelsey stack late, and then you stack every like running back, wide receiver you can, and then you have Mahomes Kelsey. So I think there's a couple options there. I'm opting for Rice just because I think Kelsey could be done. I think he could be cooked. But at the same time, Kelsey's going in round like 12 or something like that. So,
Yep.
that's another option. But my focus here is on Mahomes in the middle of the eighth. I mean, it's just ridiculous.
Yeah, and I think a big piece of stacks, at least in my mind, is the touchdowns. Like, because
Yep.
I just love seeing that, like I mentioned, 10 plus points that just get added to your total right away when the quarterback throws the touchdown to the receiver. And in this case, has been when Rasheed Rice is on the field, has been his favorite red zone target. I mean, Rasheed Rice has been peppered in the red zone in limited opportunity, but the numbers that he's put up in those limited games are right in line with everyone that's played all the games. So it's, I don't have the exact numbers, but I know that he's been a red zone target of Mahomes because they like to get him involved on those touch plays where he's coming around the end of the end zone or the shovel passes. They just use him in so many different ways. And yeah, like you said, the big part of this is definitely Mahomes because we all know what he can do, and he showed he still can do it. He's not close to done. It's funny to see people start to write him off of like
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
like you said, if he went out and was QB1, yeah, I guess I would be a little bit surprised, but I would be like, oh yeah, like I guess how did we kind
It's
of forget that
Mahomes.
he can
Yeah.
do that?
Yeah.
So yeah, no, this is a stack that I definitely am a fan of, and I'm also trying to actively acquire in my dynasty league by getting Patrick Mahomes because I have Rasheed Rice. So
Yeah.
no, I love it.
Yeah, Rice is also in a contract year, I forgot to mention, so
Mhm.
that can always look good for wide receivers. Yeah, I'm
Yep,
personally not going to be targeting this stack, but I mean, got to bring it up in this episode because
just so
some
much
some
upside.
people could absolutely go hit like a hard with that. So,
Yep,
yeah,
yep.
definitely a stack to bring up. All right,
No,
Vinny,
yep.
who
All
you
right.
got for your last?
So my last one, I think this is the one that has the most variance just because of the fact that I don't really believe in the quarterback as much, but that is Kyler Murray and Justin Jefferson. So you mentioned Kyler having being in a stack last year with McBride,
Yep.
and we kind of saw the downside to that with Kyler being out the whole year, McBride kind of taking off. I could see a very similar situation where we know what Justin Jefferson can do. I don't really need to list out his stats. Everything in that is like most yards before this age. Justin Jefferson is on that list. Like he's future Hall of Famer stud, coming off a bad year, but no, not worried about him at all. And he could be considered a value at the end of the first because this was your 101, 102 last year. Or no, not what last
Okay.
year because of the
2 years
QB,
ago.
but
Yeah.
the last year this is wide receiver one overall 2 years ago. So we know what he can do. Now with Kyler, the reality is that he, of course, he has a lot of things that aren't going his way. This is kind of a prove it deal, not a lot of money, a 1 year deal, and he's coming off a horrible year, very injury riddled these past few seasons. But the reality is that when he's on the field, he's a top 10 fantasy quarterback. In those 3 healthy seasons, he's been at least a top 10 fantasy quarterback, and in 2 of those seasons, in pushed into the top five because of that rushing upside. So this isn't as much so due to the connection between two players, but I think there's so much upside if Kyler hits at his current ADP of the late 10th round, mid or early 11th, because if that means you're picking Justin Jefferson in the first, second round, wherever he is right now, and you can fill out the rest of your team, take even a guy like Goff or like one of those steady quarterbacks like Purdy that we've mentioned, and then go and get Kyler Murray. And if he really starts to take off, then you just have again another 40 points a week that are coming from two players. So this is the one I just I do question if it can happen, but I think it's one to point out just because of the absolute like league winning upside from Kyler Murray potentially playing a full year and taking off again.
I'm super confident in Justin Jefferson returning to that
Yep.
elite form as long as Kyler's healthy. The biggest volatility here is unlike McBride last year where Kyler got hurt, he was still elite because he had a quarterback throwing to him.
Yep.
If Kyler gets hurt, it's JJ McCarthy again.
Very
And in
true.
that case it's very scary, but I don't want to predict injuries.
Yeah.
So I like this a lot. I think there's a lot of value in Kyler, and I think Justin Jefferson's going to be a stud. And we've seen Kyler support D Hop. He's supported McBride, so he can support elite wide receiver ones or the tight end one. And obviously, this is Justin Jefferson's team. We don't need to. Oh, is it T.J. Hawkinson? No, like Kyler can support Jefferson. So as long as he's healthy, I'm fully on board with this stack as well.
Yep.
My last one. This might be my most obviously my Patriots stack is my favorite, but I really like this one a lot too after like doing some digging into it. It's Trevor Lawrence and Parker Washington. Trevor Lawrence going at the 801, Parker Washington going at the 609. Like there's value in this alone. Um, but I was doing some more digging into stats and really was like, okay, this could be an elite stack. First of all, let's start with Trevor Lawrence. He had 9 rushing touchdowns last year, and yes, he will likely see some regression, but it's the same offense. He's under Liam Cohen again. He could have similar rushing upside. I mean, even if he goes down to 5 or 6 rushing touchdowns, I mean, there's some serious upside here now that he's done it, and it was the first year with Liam Cohen. I anticipate that he will want to use Trevor Lawrence's rushing game again. He's also only 26. He's pretty young, so he could actually be stepping up into an elite quarterback. He was drafted first overall, and I forget which draft it was, but he was drafted first overall in the
Mhm.
NFL draft. And he's got many pieces around him. I know it's like, we're like, oh, what do we do? Like, is it Parker Washington? Is it BTJ? Is it Jacoby Myers? Is it Travis Hunter? Brenton Strange? There's so many pieces. And we were just having this conversation last week, like, who is the guy we want to target? Honestly, maybe that means it's Trevor Lawrence because he'll be the most consistent with all of them. So even if it's like a rotation type situation where it's Parker Washington good 1 week, BTJ good another week, well, Trevor's still the guy throwing them the ball. So I think he's a great value. I'm starting to like him a little bit more with the rushing upside, like just who he is as a player. And I'm going with Washington as the receiver with the stack because he's going after BTJ, and BTJ I'm starting to worry about a little bit because they're like, oh, we want him to be a deep threat. Well, he had some drop issues last year, so I don't know how I feel about that. And if they isolate him into that role, well, somebody's got to kind of do it all. And this was really interesting to me. Both Parker Washington and Trevor Lawrence had a connection last year, and after the bye week, so from week 9 on, Parker Washington was the wide receiver 11. He
Mm.
averaged 14.9 PPR points a game which was zero point 0.1 more than Zay Flowers, who finished as the overall wide receiver 7, and more than CeeDee Lamb. So I know it's like CD coming back from injury, there's Pickens, I get it, but this is kind of like an elite number for, we're talking PPR. You're getting this guy in the late sixth, and this guy has like some serious, like almost wide receiver one overall upside. So it's kind of crazy to me. And you take out the two games where he had a 45% or lower snap percentage in those two games, like during that same stretch, his numbers would be even better. I didn't do the math on it, but as a full-time player, like this 14.9 average will go up probably into the 15s, maybe 16. So if he's getting a full-time role, which they're hyping him up, but they're hyping everybody up in Jacksonville. I mean, this is a huge upside play, and I think we could be getting value on these guys because nobody knows who to take. So I kind of like this. I think Parker Washington has to be the guy. He excelled. I'm trusting Liam Cohen too. Like this was the offense. They excelled in the second half of the year after the bye. And these two guys had a huge connection. So yeah, I wasn't never into like Parker Washington like everybody else is, but man, like I read into those numbers and everybody was talking about those last 4 weeks. Well, I'm even more intrigued since the bye week. So, yeah, this is a cool stack and I'm not going to be targeting this going into drafts, but if the board falls this way, like it could be a sick stack to have.
Yeah, no, those stats are impressive. I really didn't know it was going on for that long in terms of like the production for Parker Washington.
Yeah, me
I
neither.
still, I like you pointed out the side, and I still think I'm very much in the camp of I'd rather just go and get Lawrence and take a more of an upside. There's upside with Parker Washington, but I just feel like unless like you seem to have a stance that Washington's the guy that or like the has the most upside to be that guy based on the value, which could happen. I just think I would rather because there's like you said it's going to be so variable from week to week, and then also the fact that if you factor in Travis Hunters, who like I don't believe will be a very valuable fantasy asset,
Yeah.
but they spent the number 2 overall pick on him. He's going to get some sort of work on offense. And so then that's another mouth. And I just don't know if I can commit in a draft like with the stack upside in mind. So like I think I would like to have each of these guys individually potentially, but I just don't know if I would invest in both of them on the same team. But I see the upside.
Fair. Yeah. I mean, I'm definitely playing this one rather than stack together with touchdown upside. I'm definitely playing value into this one
Yep,
specifically
yep.
because I'm looking at look at receivers going right above Parker Washington, who's the wide receiver 34 right now. Marvin Harrison Jr., Jordan Tyson, Brian Thomas Jr., Carnell Tate, Roma Dunze, Christian Watson, DJ Moore. Like a lot of those names, I would prefer Parker Washington. Um, Definitely over Marv, probably Tyson, definitely BTJ, Dunze maybe even. So, and then guys going after him, Makai Lemon, he's been hurt. DK Metcalf, don't like that. Quentin Johnston, I like. Alec Pierce, I like. Cortland Sutton, Jaden Reed, Jordan Addison. Like, there's just not a lot of guys who I think boast the same upside Parker Washington has at this point in the draft. So six does feel like, whoa, like it's still the sixth round. But when you look at where the wide receiver value is at that point, it's like, okay, like this is kind of a nice shot. Like this could be your wide receiver three, wide receiver four, even. So it could end up looking real good as like almost this dart throw that you're taking that could end up hitting big time.
That's true. Yeah, there really isn't much risk with it. I guess if you're getting him in the 7th round, like 7th rounders could win you a league, but they also don't lose you a league for being a
Right.
bad pick. So, yeah, but it's funny to think about because like those guys that are going in front of him, I feel like every year like those are the shiny new rookies and like Marvin
Yep.
Harrison, who everyone's waiting to just so those just feel like if I'm looking at a board, like I'd kind of rather have those guys. But how it works is it never works out that way, where all those guys end up being the what we thought the potential would be. So Parker Washington does kind of feel like that name that like I kind of look away from, but then looking back, it's like, oh, how do we miss that? So
Yeah.
I like the fact that you're putting a stamp on a guy. I just am not there yet, but hey, I hope I get burned. I hope it ends up
Yeah.
being a good stack.
Look, I'm kind of with you too, but it's really hard to look away from those second half numbers of last
Yeah.
year.
Yep.
So, and if we're big on the Jaguars offense, somebody's got to produce,
No, you're
you know.
right. Yep.
So take your shot on whoever you want. Like I can't hate if you want BTJ or if you want Jacoby Myers, like take your shot. But I think
Yep.
Parker Washington's the answer for me.
Yep.
But that'll do it for the Stacks episode. Nice and short, as we said. So yeah, I'll be uploading this, whenever. But we just a little update. We will have a mock draft coming next, I believe, mock draft, and then we get into rankings. So we may end up taking like a couple weeks off. I'll be traveling. I know we're both doing some traveling and we got things going on. So we may be taking a couple weeks off. If we fit a mock draft in within the next 2 weeks, awesome. If not, you'll probably get some double uploads with the rankings throughout, some weeks after that in late July, early August, things like that. So we will have some we will have to do some double uploads in certain weeks just because of the traveling and everything. And we want to stay as up to date as possible so we can finish everything we want to do before the season starts. So keep that in mind. We may miss some weeks this summer, but we will be getting through everything as we need to do. It just might be more sporadic than once a week as we've been doing. So
Yep.
looking forward to that mock draft, though. I haven't done one in a minute. We'll both have our own teams this time, and
Mhm.
it'll be our one and only because we just have too much else to get to. But it'll be a fun one to do. I'm actually really looking forward to that. So that'll be fun.
Yeah, and in it's a fun point of the year to do mock drafts because ADP will shift,
Yep.
but it won't shift as much as we all think, even though the season's 2 months away. Like players, everyone kind of has their set in stone opinions, and of course, if there's drastic injuries or news coming out of camp, but for the most part, stuff is going to kind of stick around similar value. So it is kind of a decent look of what it could look like in 2 months.
Yeah, for sure. But that being said, it's the end of this episode, and whenever it is, we'll see you in the next episode.
Peace.